Okay. Thanks for coming, everyone. All right, we're good to go. So, I'm Garrett Goodman, the Director of Business Development for Wochit. We're a video creation platform. Today we're going to be talking about best practices and the idea of creating video for social audiences versus creating video for mobile audiences. So we have a great collection of panelists here to my right, to your left. We have Holden Frith, who's the digital editor at The Week. We have Nikki Usher, who is the George Washington University. That's not your title. Researcher at George Washington, professor. We have Trushar Barot, who is at BBC World Service, the mobile editor. And we have Martin Belam, who is social and new formats editor at The Guardian. So the format today will start with just 3 slides that I have for you guys, and then we'll go down the line. There's the first slide. And then we'll go down the line, and each of the panelists here will share some of their best practices, some of their insights from their experience. So what I wanted to do was just kind of set the stage, make sure that we're all on the same page here, and share some interesting statistics with you guys about online video right now. So you have the Reuters Institute, which recently did a study where they interviewed a bunch of digital leaders from news organizations around the world, and they found that 79% of the respondents said they'd be investing more in video this year than they had last year. So what we see is that a lot of people are now putting money into video, and the question is, where is that money going, and what are news organizations trying to do with it? So one of the directions is towards social video. You guys have probably seen that Facebook is prioritizing video like crazy. Just as personal Facebook users, you see more and more video in the feed. News organizations have recognized that too. They see it as an opportunity. And actually, CNN's Facebook videos are getting shared 5.6 times more than their external links. So if you think about it, when you're doing social strategy at all, video is the most powerful type of content that you can put onto Facebook. And when we look at the mobile opportunity, we can see not only is there a huge rise in consumption on the news sites from mobile audiences, but also there's a lot of potential for advertising revenue. And actually, the IAB, which is the International Advertising Bureau, found that mobile video was the fastest growing ad format last year. So that's to kind of set the stage. Lots of people are investing in video now. There's a huge opportunity in social, there's a huge opportunity in mobile, but what does that actually mean practically? So I'll hand it over to Holden now, who has some interesting experience on both of those.
Sure. So I thought it would probably be useful to start saying what my first experience of creating video was. And this was about 8 years ago when I worked for The Times, and some of the senior editors decided that video is the next big thing for online journalism, and so we all needed a week of multimedia training. So we had 2 days where we were taught how to use video cameras, which were big tape-based Sony Z1 tape video cameras. 2 days of Final Cut Pro training, very complicated program that takes at least 10 times that amount of time to even get a basic knowledge of. And then 1 day's presentation skills training. And I think what the editors had in mind was that the website was then going to be filled with BBC quality multimedia clips, and overnight we'd be in this new digital age. And what we ended up with, excuse me, was a lot of terrified-looking print journalists reading out scripts with the look of a rabbit stuck in a headlight, and interspersed with that a few slightly shaky video clips that were barely relevant to what they were talking anyway. So when we started thinking about video at The Week about 6 months ago, which admittedly was rather late, my main aim was to avoid doing any of that. So we had 3 main rules. First being no voiceovers. Second was using video footage that had been produced by professionals, so by people like Reuters, by AP, by any other source, or by people who happened to be in the right time at the right place and just had that really compelling video footage where it didn't matter that it was a bit shaky because you were seeing news happen right in front of you. And finally, the third rule was that we weren't repurposing print stories, we were writing captions specifically for online footage so that the words went with the clip and also were designed for the platform you were going to be seeing them on. And so the first formats we came up with were designed to go into a new news app that we'd launched called The Weekday, which is a twice daily roundup of news and analysis. And this was intended really to be a very brief roundup of 3 world news stories that just deepened the sort of coverage we were able to give alongside our text-based coverage. So this is an example of one of those. So it's a very simple format. The aim is to convey as much information as we possibly can within a minute and to give a roundup of a few stories that we're not covering elsewhere in the app. And we thought, as well as using this for our mobile app, we'd also stick it on our Facebook page because why not? And it did reasonably well. It got quite a lot of views. It got a lot more engagement than our text posts were. So we thought we were reasonably happy with that. And we continued being happy with that until a few months ago we started doing videos that were aimed more specifically at a Facebook audience. So what we did there was we picked a single story about a subject that we thought had a bit more social potential, and we gave it a little bit more room to breathe. And this is an example of that. There's a similarity of approach there, but also it feels different. It has a different sort of pace to it. The subject matter is different. And what we found is that these were just shared far, far more than the others, sort of more than 10 times as many shares we get for these. And I think the reasons are fairly clear. The roundups, they're informative, we hope, they're interesting, but they don't tell you, if you share one of those, it doesn't tell you much about the person who's sharing it. Whereas with the boxing video, it's something that people can use to say a little bit more about themselves. Most simply, I'm interested in this kind of story. It's a little bit counterintuitive, it's a bit surprising, I like this. But also it's a way of saying, I care about girls' rights, or I know that Muslims are not a monolithic block of people, or I understand that the world is a complex and human place. You can say all of those things very simply by sharing this video, and there's a lot of people who want to say some combination of those kind of things. So what I'd say has really emerged over the last few months, since in fact signing up for this panel, which initially I thought was a slightly false opposition between social video and mobile video, is in fact there is a difference. And while it may be that all social video is mobile, not all mobile video is social. That's a conclusion.
Thank you. Nikki, you've got some good videos to show?
Yeah, so I just want to first start off with my perspective is a little bit different. I don't do product development. In fact, I don't even make content. I'm a researcher. And what I like to do, I'm trained as a sociologist, and I watch people work. I watch journalists work. And one of the things that we tend to forget about in the conversation about moving forward towards video is the actual costs of labor. So what it actually means within the newsroom to create video, to create mobile video, social video, basically any kind of video. So I want to show these two examples and then ask a couple of questions and tell a quick story and then move on. So this, as you see here, if you try to search for a specific news video from a Gannett site, this is what happens on Google. That is not good. This is the state of American metropolitan news journalism right now, where searching for videos is impossible, and this is what you get. So we have a search problem for newspapers. And actually, if you look at most newspapers in the US and even some of the largest ones, finding exclusive video content is hard to do. Like a specialized place to find video content. And then when you do find it, it gets put on autoplay. So that's a separate problem. The next thing I want to show you is something that was created as a Vine. It's the middle one, I hope. Sorry. This one, so I'll show you. It's go to the middle one. If you go click on Miami Herald. Okay. Go to miamiherald.video.com. And I'll tell you if that's the actual website, sorry. miamiherald.com/video. And scroll down. This is slow load time, right? Rob Gronowski visits police. If you go back up there, here. This was shot as a Vine. So this is like, this raises a particular question.
Officer Gronkowski, report to work. Copy that.
NFL football player, just for context, for the Miami Dolphins. And then the next one I want to show is just an online video that was intended to go viral on social. These are the things that entertain us in the US. So can you put, it's the Des Moines Register, not this one, it's the one underneath it. It's about a pig at a theater.
Look at the pig! Hi, Joy.
It's one of those things, when people come, if she's not here, I feel very bad because they are coming to see her, and sometimes I'm even known to leave during the movie, go home and get her so that people can see her afterwards, because people do bring their relatives or friends so they can meet Joy, because I think it's probably pretty unique that I'm not sure if any other theater has a miniature pig as a mascot.
End it there. So a couple of things about these videos that you immediately notice. This doesn't look anything like the week video that you just saw, right? This is not like a neatly put together video. But so there were sort of like two strategies behind these videos. The first was like, hey, let's put up this super unproduced video up on Vine because everyone likes NFL stars, so they're just going to share it, and that's going to drive traffic back to the site. And then, unfortunately, the video you saw with the pig is considered a highly produced video for American metropolitan newspapers. And so part of that is the reality that for a lot of news organizations, you can't do Guardian quality video, you can't do the Week style video, unless you have Garrett's app called Wochit, which you want to purchase. So there's a real sort of question about standardization and what kinds of standards you're willing to have when you're putting up video content. That was something that Martin and we were just talking about before the presentation. So just throwing out a couple of questions, which is, what kinds of standards are you willing to experiment with? And are you okay with some of this stuff going up on your site and going viral? Like, do you want the Des Moines Register to be known for a windy video that looks like could have been taken on a home camera of a pig? Like, is that what you want your highly produced video to be? Right? So there's a question about that. There's also a labor question in terms of the structure of the news organization, and this is particularly important, which is, do you want a separate, this is the old battles that used to get played out between online and traditional, right, is being played out in video. So should video be integrated or separate from the rest of the newsroom? And we can talk further about that, but these old patterns of trying to have communication facilitated between who does the content, who creates the original story, and how that gets reincorporated into the workflow are really serious issues that when you look at the finished product, you forget about.
We have a third video?
I think we've shown these poor people enough.
All right, then. Trushar, please.
So I guess, unlike the previous examples, which were newspapers, working at the BBC, traditionally our strength is video, television. So you would think that it would be quite an easy thing for us to move into mobile video. But I guess coming with a traditionally strong TV history, there are different challenges that we face. Quite often it's to do with our main journalists and correspondents who are out in the field who've been very used to using big cameras and having proper shoot edits in the field, working towards the late evening news bulletins with a 3 to 4 minute news package, which is heavily produced and a very clear narrative where a story is built up. So pretty much all of those principles don't really apply to mobile video. And we've been doing a lot of work around trying to think about how to have a more consistent, polished sort of video product. I don't think we're quite there yet, but amongst the things that we've done very recently is just come up with some set of sort of standardized criteria and guidelines, not too dissimilar from you. But I guess how we first started this process was about 18 months ago in earnest. And one method that proved to be really successful was just getting some of our main correspondents to actually think about how they would film a story using a mobile device themselves, rather than just trying to think about aspect ratios and how to position cameras and so on, to actually film a report themselves just using a simple iPhone. So the first example I wanted to show you is one which some of you may have seen before, by one of our correspondents, Matthew Price. He was covering the migrant crisis, and we asked him, as part of his deployment, just take out his iPhone and just see if there's a way he could experiment with telling a story in a way that just felt a bit different to a just traditional TV report. So we won't play the whole thing, but I'll give you an idea.
7 o'clock in the morning in the rush hour in Budapest. The bus stop, the train station, and here's where there must be several thousand are sleeping. They extend right the way under that concourse there. Here are the temporary portaloos. Just going to try and head down there now. Oh my goodness. Remember, this is a European capital city. More children sleeping there.
So we can probably stop it there, but so this was, the actual report was about just over 4 minutes, but you get the idea. It's a very different video to what a traditional TV news bulletin report would be like. And this video, we posted it on our website, and it did really well on YouTube as well. And I think one of the lessons that our correspondents are really learning and understanding is that sometimes you can tell stories in a much more personal, human, emotive way when you have this sort of device so close to you, and you're just following it around and almost discovering the story yourself as a journalist as you're entering that particular arena. And so that, I think, has been a really effective way of just changing the mindset of a lot of our journalists to really understanding the power of video told through mobile devices. Another example is a little bit different. We've been experimenting with Snapchat just on the normal sort of stories channels of Snapchat for a little while now. One of the first sort of examples of how we used it was the BBC Panorama programme. Our correspondent John Sweeney was, again, for the same story, the migrant crisis, was assigned to follow migrants across Europe and follow them around. And so we sent a digital producer with him to see if he could document the documentary on Snapchat. And it happened over the course of a sort of a week or so. And then what we ended up doing was, it was a really interesting, engaging way of telling a story inside the platform for that young audience. But the producer then also, after they came back to base, they sort of stitched all the different snaps together and combined it into a sort of a 10-minute Snapchat documentary, which we then posted back out onto Facebook and to YouTube. And it was the first example of the BBC effectively producing a vertical video documentary. And I think one of the things that was really interesting, well, actually, let's have a look and I'll talk a little bit more about it.
The world's first digital exodus. I've been covering refugee crisis since 1988, and this is the first one where I've seen people using iPhones, GPS, WhatsApp to communicate with their friends and family in Germany and back to Syria. These people are using smart technology to make their desperate journeys as safe as humanly possible. And why not? It's a very, very long way from Syria to northern Europe. Train stops were somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Greece.
Stop it there. So again, you get sort of an idea of how they were sort of doing these Snapchat updates during the course of that week. And I think one of the things that was really interesting about that was when you're using a different platform like Snapchat, one of the things the team were really aware of was how can they maximize the storytelling capabilities of the app itself, so the types of graphics you can use, the filters you can use, the way you do text, and then bringing all of that back, stitching it together, and then publishing back out to a broader audience, I thought was a really good way of taking advantage of Snapchat's unique features, but then offering it to a wider audience, because the majority of BBC News users, you may be surprised to know, aren't on Snapchat. And so I thought that was just a really good way for us to use a mobile-first, social media platform like Snapchat to tell a story. And the final example, as with many news organizations now, we've been experimenting a lot with 360 video. And we did a really interesting one with NASA when the British astronaut went out not too long ago. And this is probably the most recent one that I can tell you about, which was taken a few days ago as part of a documentary series looking at the...
Welcome to the deck of the
Arctic.
Ocean Endeavour. It's an expedition tour ship that's exploring the Antarctic Peninsula. We're now heading southwest through the Le Maire Channel. That's a narrow body of water about halfway down. This place is very famous for its incredible beauty. That's why all the tourists you can see around you in their yellow parkas have wrapped up very warm to stand on deck and take lots of photos. There are 180 tourists aboard the Ocean Endeavour. That's just a fraction, though, of almost 40,000 people who will visit Antarctica as tourists this year, and they'll mostly be on expedition cruises like this one. It is a very skilled job to navigate in these icy waters. Some of the chunks of floating ice around us carved from glaciers, and they extend deep beneath the water. The captain and the navigators aboard take it very slowly, constantly watching and listening. Floes scrape along the side of the boat's hull, grinding and juddering as they go. This expedition is particularly special, though, because aboard is a team of scientists who've hitched a lift to Antarctica to reach penguin colonies. They're setting up a network of cameras to monitor the birds. And this is the view from the middle of one of those penguin colonies, close to the shore on the Antarctic mainland. Today, Dr. Tom Hart from Oxford University is coming back to a camera that he fixed.
I just wanted to get to the penguins before we stop. This is my favourite bit of the video. So again, for me, I think one of the things that's so nice about those sorts of videos is that they really take a user right into the heart of an environment that is probably unlike any that they've seen before. Again, the value of 360 video, as far as I see, is that, yeah, it's fantastic, particularly on a mobile device, where you can just move around and see it rather than sort of pinching and grabbing as on a desktop. But our own websites can't handle 360 video, so we rely on third-party platforms like YouTube and Facebook for us to be able to experiment and actually expose our audience to these sorts of experiences. And so I think that if we were just relying on our own platforms, we would be diminished around the sorts of mobile video that we could potentially create. So I'll end it there for now.
Thank you. Martin, what are you up to now that you're back at the Guardian?
Well, my job, it feels like, is more about video every single day, and it feels like everybody we talk to, as that stat said, are investing more in. And one of the things that I think is a challenge for organizations is to think about how they quantify their success with video. It really hit home to me just after Christmas. I saw a video, if you know the business site Quartz, QZ.com. They had this video of professional drone racing. So it's point of view from the perspective of the drone, and it's going through these amazing cubes that are lit up, and it's in a stadium. I think it's Boston Red Sox Stadium. But anyway, it's going around the stadium, and it goes through a tunnel, and it's spectacular video, and it was so good I watched it all the way through on Facebook on my phone and rewatched it. And it had captions, so you didn't have to have the sound up. It was explaining what was going on. And then a couple of days later, I wanted to show it to someone, and it was only then I realized there was also a 1,500-word article that went with the video, and I'd never clicked through to it. And so I don't know whether Quartz consider me watching the video twice a success, or me not reading the article a failure. And I think as an editorial teams, you kind of need to work out what you're trying to achieve. Now we kind of, at The Guardian, obviously people think of us as a newspaper, but we've had a multimedia department for years and years and years. We've got about 60 people who work in multimedia across the offices in London and Sydney and New York. And so we do produce a lot of video content, but the kind of social success of video is really making us think about the way we distribute things. So we had, I guess that's been one of the dominant things in the news agenda. We had a video that was also about refugees, but it was a kind of heartwarming story about this family who had lost their cat. They were taking their cat with them. They'd been separated from their cat, and then the cat was found, and it was brought to them where they were living now. And there wasn't that much video footage, actually. There was the joyous reunion, but most of it was stills. And so we did like a rough cut of it, and it went up on Facebook, and obviously the internet loves cats, and it loves happy endings. It did really, really well. And the person who made it it had gone up while they were in transit somewhere, and their plan had been to like make a much more polished version for the site. But once a few million people have already seen it on Facebook, what's the point of making the second extended version? You've done it, and you might as well move on to the next story. One of the things that we're having a lot of success with is kind of explainer videos, where we get someone to just talk through one issue for 90 seconds. 90 seconds seems a really good length for Facebook video. It's subtitled, so you don't have to start fiddling around to check whether the audio is on. You can follow what's going on. And again, we had one where Julie Bindel was talking about principles of free speech. And within a couple of days, it had 4.5 million views on Facebook. And I'm sure she won't mind me saying that she really gets 4.5 million views for her articles. That's a massive step up for effectively a short opinion piece reaching a much wider audience. But I think one of the things I've often argued is that in the early days of the web, we weren't kind of sure what to do with interactivity, and we tended to just put up articles that you could print out, or audio clips that could be broadcast on radio, or video packages that could go on television. And I think one of the interesting things around social video is the format is very different to the kind of formats that we are used to producing for television or clip packages. If you step up from Vine, the 6-second loop, to Instagram, which is 15 seconds and now going up to perhaps to a minute, and then Snapchat, and then perhaps slightly longer form doing well with video on Twitter and Facebook at about a minute and 90 seconds. They're not the kind of things that people have traditionally made. Certainly at The Guardian, we tend to go for longer videos, we go for very glossy production. And so that's kind of like a challenge in the way which stories you choose to tell them, and the style you try to tell them with. And I do feel that there's a very big production gap. So most of the time when you're making video, you're using very high-end screens, and you're using massive monitors, and the user's actually going to view it on this. And I think, even just down to things like the text sizes that you use for captions, what you've been used to producing for high definition and looks fine on a big monitor in the office is not going to look fine on the phone. We do a bit of work with a startup called Vidsy, and one of the bits of their technology is they insist on previewing all the video as if it's on Instagram or as if it's on Snapchat. There's no big glossy version of it. You can only ever see it at the eventual size it's going to be. We've been experimenting a little bit with Facebook live streaming, which seems very interesting. Again, a bit experimental. Let's try different formats. I was just trying to, prove I can walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and was doing some from outside earlier, looking at the statues in the piazza. But we've covered like a demonstration outside Parliament in the UK, where we knew there was going to be a demonstration against austerity. So we sent a couple of people on my team down, and they were kind of doing a piece to camera and chatting to people. We also hosted a big debate in a theatre with some of the biggest actual political leaders of the EU referendum that's going on in the UK at the moment, and we had that live streaming on YouTube, but for the first 10 minutes I just wandered down to the front of the audience and pointed this at the stage and went live on Facebook. And initially during that live period we were seeing maybe like 4 times the audience figure watching the stream coming off my phone rather than the stream coming off the whole camera rig we got. I only did it for 10 minutes because, to be honest, it was really boring, and I was worried about my battery life, and it was starting to hurt my hand holding it up. So one thing I learned was you probably do need to apply a bit more production rigor to these things. BuzzFeed UK appear, I think at some point, to have got the whole office to write down every single idea they think they could do on live Facebook, and are now just ticking them off one by one. So they've done things where they've got drunk in the office and then tried to do like Trivial Pursuit or like a trivia quiz. They got a chemistry set and were trying to do like school chemistry experiments and make them work. It's really interesting, trying lots and lots of different things. And I think that's kind of the space we're in at the minute, a lot of experimentation. There's 2 things that worry me very much. One is the ethics around this, because, I mean, literally, about 3 button pushes away from streaming you to The Guardian's 5 million followers on Facebook, and we've never had journalists in that position before. They normally have to file material, it goes through a producer. As you can say, I mean, I think that kind of, that travelogue, I'm here, I mean, you would never normally have that much dead air in that walking around the refugees thing. It makes it incredibly powerful, but I mean, at some point we're going to start seeing journalists from war zones, journalists finding themselves in breaking news situations, having to make the decision on the ground, do I go live with this? And perhaps the tools aren't right for us. I mean, you know, as a journalist, I'd kind of like to go live, but with a built-in knowing that there's a 10-second delay or something, so that if something unexpected happens as a journalist, I know I need to cut the feed at this point. And so I think that's got to be a discussion with some of the platforms. And then the other one is, I don't know how we make any money out of it.
That's a big one. I really like what you were talking about in this idea of having some notion of success and what that's going to look like, and having that guide the types of experiments that you do. And I was wondering if Holden and Trushar, you guys could both share what you view as success in video and these specific examples that you mentioned.
Well, in our 2 formats, we have very different reasons and different ways of making money, or in some cases actually gaining reach, which they aim. So the videos that go into an app are not directly monetized. They're part of an app that's sponsored, and so that's a relatively forgiving business model in that it gives us a wide leeway of saying, we will put together the editorial package we think is right, and somebody is funding that overall. And so we don't have to, you know, it's down to our judgment rather than the market's judgment in terms of the specific content we're putting together, which is a nice luxury to have, and on the web you don't necessarily have that luxury. In terms of the social package, that's also intended for a specific, and at the moment not directly monetized, purpose, which is just to grow our social reach. The week was relatively late to digital as a whole, and relatively late to social specifically, and so we're really playing catch up, and we want to produce the sort of content that will give us the widest possible reach. And as it has turned out from our various experiments, it's well worth our while to create specific video packages for Facebook. They're watched far more than, they're engaged with far more than anything else we put out there. They're shared far more. They give us a great deal of reach. And so indirectly that helps us with our monetization. It gives us a bigger audience. People will click through from Facebook to our articles. But the question of how do you assess the monetary value of a Facebook share is something that we haven't quite figured out yet, certainly.
I think we're still, catching up with on-site video metrics. Traditionally, they've always been pretty poor for us. I think they're getting better, and there's a push to make them better over the next year. I guess really the market leaders for really good video metrics at the moment is YouTube. And they, consistently advise that the most important metric is what they call watch time. So, which is not just someone clicking on a video, but how long have they stayed watching that video? Because that tells you a lot more about the success of that video. If it's a 5-minute video and the majority of them are leaving after 15 seconds, then even though you may have loads of people clicking on the video, that's not actually that useful a metric. What's really useful is just seeing how many people have stayed with that video. And I think views themselves. I think I have this constant conversation with a lot of our YouTube editors, particularly at BBC World Service, who are obsessed with watch time, but all their editors are only obsessed with how many views their videos have had. And it's a real challenge for, I think, a lot of video journalists, because editors understand views, but actually they're not very useful as a video metric. And a view means different things to different platforms. So, YouTube, a view is classed as someone who's watched a video for at least, 30 seconds. Whereas, Facebook view is about 3 seconds or 6 seconds or something a lot shorter. Would Facebook count or, Twitter count a view if you're just scrolling up a timeline and it's auto-playing and you just happen to pass it? Have you actually watched it? Do their metrics say you have? And so and sometimes you might think that, oh, this video's had amazing views on Facebook and not so many views on YouTube, and then you suddenly divert your strategy just towards Facebook video. And so I think that's where it can get a bit difficult, and you have to be quite careful that you're measuring consistently from platform to platform as well.
Well, and then one of the other problems, right, is when you start making poor judgments about when to put in advertising. And so a lot of what you have are sort of the assumption that, oh, we can sell, the most money we can make is from video advertising, so we'll put in a pre-roll ad, and so your metrics are off because people have started to watch a pre-roll ad and then just left. And I think particularly as we move towards social video, the appetite for watching pre-roll just declines dramatically. And so when you talk about monetization, you have to realize that like there's got to be another way to think about monetizing video other than the standard pre-roll advertising, because I just don't think it's going to work.
Right. Martin, are you guys doing experimentation with Snapchat?
With Snapchat, we haven't actually.
Okay.
It interests me very much, but I can see how fun brands can have fun on Snapchat, and The Guardian does have fun, but we're also quite a serious news organisation, and I, in my mind, I haven't quite worked out how we marry them together, because I feel like if you go into it, you probably need to do a range of the kind of material that you show, and you want to show that serious news, and I'm kind of not quite sure that it's necessarily right for that audience. I'm a big fan of Instagram, actually, and I feel like that we're looking a lot at how you do little bits of storytelling within Instagram. I'm a social producer, Eleni, who works on it, who's really, really good at it.
So for Instagram, what is your metric of success? What do you look at?
So we kind of are just looking at the general growth of the. I've actually become basically the king of dead people at The Guardian. So when people die, I'm the judge of, do we find the most beautiful photo of them and put it on Instagram? So Johan Cruyff, it's like I've got to find the definitive picture of him. That's. But they always come to me because I'm old enough to know whether these people are significant or not. Because all the other people doing social media are too young to even know who these people have died are. So we're looking at some interesting ways. So we're looking at how we cover the EU referendum in the UK and how we do that on Instagram, and how we kind of try and show an experience of what being part of the EU is about and the kind of impact it will have on young people if we leave. And we're looking at Instagram as a way of doing that. What I hate on Instagram is people kind of put in half a photo and then the caption that tells you the story. I find that that just doesn't seem a natural way to tell news on that platform. It feels like an interruption in what is basically a nice collection of your friends' best photos, and then suddenly you've got kind of they feel very shouty and adverty. I don't really want The Guardian to be doing that. No. And I think something like and that's potentially where something like Snapchat comes in. But I look at Instagram as potentially it's a touch point for an audience that isn't necessarily going to encounter The Guardian very much in any other ways. That kind of age group is certainly quite unlikely to pick up a printed newspaper. They might visit the website if stuff is done well socially, but they're probably not loyal users of the website. Whereas Instagram is I feel like a place to at least put the brand in front and some of our best storytelling in front of that audience. I feel like when I think about social media, I feel like individual accounts and individual platforms, I tend to look at them as, is this a thing that I want to drive traffic to us, and that's what we're doing there, and therefore everything must be measured on, does it drive traffic? Or is this a thing to reach people who we aren't reaching otherwise? And that gives you a bit more leeway to work across different platforms.
Can you just give us an idea of the anatomy of your team? How many are video experts? How many are social media producers?
So I've got quite a small team. It's around about 5 people who I work with. I've been back at The Guardian for a couple of months, so I'm kind of like feeling my way and trying to sort of find the coalition of the willing who are interested in doing these kind of experiments. So like doing the live Facebook video this afternoon is the media desk will kind of basically just go nuts, do whatever you want to do out there. It's like we haven't got someone out there, so anything you do is only adding to our coverage, however amateurish it turns out to have been. Right. But and so it's finding those people around the business who are interested in trying out new things.
So I'm very curious to know then, are there specific departments that you see candidates emerge from more often than others?
I think a lot of it depends on the personalities, and if you've got someone on a team who's quite keen and very good at the social media stuff, then I feel like I want to try and work with and nurture them, and I'm more likely to end up, I mean, you know, there's never any shortage of stories that we could be doing things socially or with video at The Guardian. We try and produce one video a day that's specifically aimed at the Facebook audience. We've got a couple of people who work specifically on that.
And Nikki, in your research, have you come across specific desks, specific editorial beats where people seem to be more keen to try these kinds of things?
I mean, I think it's exactly what Martin was saying, which is that it's, at this point, still very individually focused. And the cooperation between the social media team and the video team and the journalist really has to, the text-based journalist really has to congeal, or the, you know, traditional video journalist has to congeal. And so there's a real problem because there's a timing problem, right? Like there's different timing when there's an event that's, even if it's going to be posted online 30 minutes later, right? Or at the end of the day, or if it's like a 2-week story, the process of doing a video is just really different than writing a text story or doing a video for broadcast. And then there's a sourcing question, which is sometimes people don't want to talk to you for social, but they want to talk to you for a real sit-down produced video, or they don't want to be on video at all. And I think the journalists that are comfortable with that ambiguity are willing to experiment, but these are very real barriers that come through the process of actually creating a story.
Right. I think it's probably, unless you guys have something else you want to add, a good time to open it up to the audience. So you guys have questions for us. We've got one here. If we've got a microphone. Have we got a microphone, please? Yeah, why don't we shout for now? We've got a mic coming.
Thank you. Yes, Stephen Jones from the Press Association. So Martin alluded to the monetisation issue, which I think is on everyone's mind when it comes to social. Obviously, for bigger publishers, there's an element to which you can kind of dip your toe into the water and give it a try and see what comes of it. But do you have any thoughts about what maybe smaller publishers should be looking at doing who can't necessarily afford to try something out with no immediate return? Do you think there's a solution there?
So I mentioned Vidsy as one of the company we're working with, and they're kind of looking at how do you tap into the fact that there are people out there for fun making really good stuff on Vine or Instagram and really good short form video, and is there a way that you can kind of use those as a collective to commission from them, and so that I mean they're quite commercially focused, but I've been looking at it from an editorial perspective. So if you've got a brand campaign or something that, you know, perhaps The Guardian recently did a month-long series about the NHS in the UK, and actually we could have perhaps gone out to that kind of audience and said, can you do us a load of short clips about your experience of the NHS? And presumably some of them would have been lovely and beautiful, and some of them would have been really angry people who'd been waiting for ages in A&E. But between them we would have had like a kind of patchwork of, I guess, bits rather than video pieces. And so I think there's a kind of community there's a lot more people out there producing video outside of the industry than there are producing it in the industry, and I think we, digitally we can find a way to try and tap into that.
I think, to answer your question, I think right now there are kind of three primary ways that we can look at monetizing social media through video. The first one is kind of what Holden alluded to, this idea of driving traffic back. So using video as a way, because it's such a powerful content type on Facebook, using it as a way to broaden your reach and grow your audience so that when you do put external links back to your site, you drive more traffic and then you monetize them through your owned and operated properties. So the first one would be to drive traffic back, but it's not so much a direct use of the video to drive straight back to your site. It's more of a longer play. Because what I've seen from the publishers that we work with is this notion of putting a teaser video on Facebook of just 15 seconds of a full video and then expecting the audience to click back to watch the full video kind of falls flat on its face. And the click-through rates are pretty abysmal from what I hear, and so I've seen a lot more publishers move away from that. So the second kind of way that you can monetize video is through branded content, right? Facebook has relaxed their regulations on carrying a sponsor's message within the video. So now it's allowed to say, this video has been sponsored by, brought to you by. There was recently an interview in The Guardian with a UK media company called Unilad, where they said that they charge £12 CPM for a regular display ad on their website, but actually they can charge £20,000 for a single sponsored video that goes across their social channels. Unilad does have a lot of reach, so they are obviously leveraging that, but sponsored video for a niche audience can be very valuable for the brand, as long as it's done well and provides uplift for both the brand and the media company, right? And then the third option, which is currently not open to everybody, just a select few, is native monetization, right? Because Facebook has this beta program right now where certain publishers like the Huffington Post and Business Insider and El Mundo are able to actually make money from the video views that they're getting on Facebook itself. And Facebook is experimenting with that and will open it up more widely. It's just a matter of when, not a matter of if. From what I hear from the people that we work with, they primarily are paying based on view time, so similar to the metric that you mentioned, Trushar, on YouTube. But it's also very non-transparent and kind of typical Facebook fashion. And so the publishers who've told me about their experiences so far say it's very hard to tell what actually drives the revenue and very hard to then create for that metric, right? But yeah, those are three ways that you can monetize video on Facebook. Any other questions?
Hi, I am a journalist working for traditional television, and I was in September in Budapest station, where we see in our story you show us. I was with my traditional cameraman, with the traditional cameraman. I have done the same, exactly the same story. The cameraman went in the metro, and I was back and speaking and telling what I was seeing. Exactly the same. So I don't understand which is the great difference between tell a story with a smartphone or a traditional camera. Maybe the difference is the content, how you can do a good story, an emotional story, but not in the media. Yes, my video went broadcast on traditional TV, but then he has been delivered on social network as all the other. So which is the great difference?
I don't know if it's me you should ask.
I guess the real difference from that video, certainly amongst the traditional TV reporters who fed back to us when they saw that video, was that there's a lot of potential dead air in that video where the correspondent isn't saying anything and he's just walking around. Now, our TV correspondents get very nervous if nothing is being said in a traditional TV report after a certain period of time. You might be different for your style, but certainly if it's traditional TV, for the BBC, there needs to be something happening and something being said or being spoken. So at most you might get 2 or 3, 4 seconds of no voice, in these sorts of videos, unless there's, a lot of sound like explosions or things. But that sort of traditional walking under a tunnel, and probably as a 4-minute video, I would imagine at least half of that was no spoken word, which just wouldn't happen on a traditional TV channel. And I guess the other thing is that you don't see the reporter once on camera. And traditional TV style reporting is that you have a reporter standing outside pointing and maybe walking. And so that's again quite a different stylistic thing. And there are a few other, I guess, traditional TV style points which weren't there. And so I guess for us it was just a way of rethinking how you tell a story without the normal conventions of TV storytelling.
Sorry, apparently we have to wrap it up on that note. Thank you guys very much for this, and thank you all for being such an attentive audience.